Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, and today it's my pleasure to have Charlotte Thaarup-Owen, founder of the Mindfulness Clinic, with us today. Charlotte is an internationally experienced clinical mindfulness consultant, a pioneer of mindfulness for psychologists and leadership within Australia. She has had a particular focus on mindfulness of the body and mindful leadership for women. She currently runs mindful leadership at Newcastle University's Executive MBA. Charlotte, it's so great to have you on the show.
It's my pleasure.
So, if we could start by sharing for our listeners' benefit um, your origin story, your pain to I don't know, winning sort of a story that brought you into this whole mindfulness space. I usually find that somebody who's into meditation or mindfulness had some sort of epiphany that usually came with some pain. So could you share your story with us?
Yeah, thank you. And I wish I did. I wish I had a clear story, but I don't. So what I have, I think, is various kind of contributing factors that took me to that, which I think is probably the case for most of us. Like, there might be one that we can kind of attribute to that was, significant. Um, for me, I think I've always been a truth seeker in a way. And that's certainly a big part of it. Like I always thought that, in the West, we say so much nonsense. I'm sure we do it everywhere. But, things like, at the time when that was a contributing factor to me seeking something better was the whole notion of, goal setting and that once you get X, then you'll be happy. And I just thought it just doesn't deliver. That was one. Then there was this whole thing that, if you're just a good person and you work hard, so meritocracy, then you will, it'll deliver. And I had a very ill sister who got epilepsy when she was 12. And I thought, no, that whole thing that we now say the universe has your back, it's just not true. I mean, does it have the back of all the Ukrainians? So those nonsense sayings that we have, particularly that belong in privileged pockets, if you like, of the West, that irritated me. And I thought, it's not true. So I was seeking, that was one thing. I was looking for something that was better. Um, I actually didn't know how anxious I was till I took on mindfulness. I was in living in this idea of I just need to get the next thing done, then I'm fine. I didn't know that was anxiety. So when I came upon mindfulness and I was already doing leadership training and coaching, I came upon and I went, now we're talking. This aligns with truth. That's how it felt. This is actually telling how it is versus a theory, an idea of how it is that serves some. So I took it on. And then, of course, it was the uncovering of realizing, oh my God, how anxious I am. And then I suppose an ongoing uncovering and immersing myself in the material. So in terms of pain, is perhaps more commitment and curiosity, um, and also wanting to do the best for my clients. And I think that what I had in my bag with the traditional adult education, leadership stuff, coaching, I didn't think it was good enough. So that's why, yeah. And then I had some, I was
Did
meditating.
you end up having a diagnosis of anxiety, or was it just a thing that you came to a conclusion on your own?
Oh, it was a conclusion of my own. Yeah, I noticed how most of the time I had that sort of an energy in the body. It was really coming because I came out of my head, right? When I started mindfulness, I was living solely in my head, lost in thought. And so when I started doing mindfulness, I could notice that energy, that all the time, this charge of, and then I found that mindfulness of the body was amazing in settling that, along with exercise, of course. But that was really the first, I think, very very personal dimension to mindfulness. The next was then that I had an eating disorder, and it was already in place before I started with mindfulness. But then I started looking at it with from that perspective, which really was very, very rich. The whole denial of the body, the whole not being present with eating, not being connected to the body, the wanting to be slim, and at the cost of that, the whole diet binge cycle versus being present. So yeah, it started to uncover a lot.
So the diet binge cycle, how does that work? Because um, I'm not experienced or haven't experienced that so much as I just I kind of fall into a pattern and I keep repeating that pattern. If I'm gonna eat, I don't know, let's say a lot of crackers or something like that, I'll just keep eating them. And if I make a change to my identity and then it becomes part of me that I don't eat gluten, then I just cut it out of my diet or out of my what I consume. So, um, how does that cycle for those listeners who experience that cycle? How does that work, and how do you break out of that?
Yeah, good question. So it sounds like you're very rational about the eating, and rules based. So you can go, but that's how I'm going to do it. And some are like that, right? And you probably are in all aspects of your life a bit like that, because our relationship with eating is sort of a mirror for our relationship with life in many ways. So the binge diet cycle is this thing that it's sort of like a tightening. It's sort of, I call it the parent within. The parent within says, "That's it. You've been very naughty. You better now eat lots of salad and no sweets at night. And you're going to exercise and you're going to be very, very good." So that usually starts on a Monday morning, right? so, so the week goes, and we get more and more of that kind of slight self-righteousness. I've got my shit together now. This is it. I've got it. Day 4, I managed. Day 5, then comes, and perhaps we manage on the weekend. Perhaps Friday night we go, "I've been so good." The child comes in and go, "You've been so good. Time for a little treat, a little reward." And then you go, "Okay, it's a glass of whatever." You loosen up a little bit. You open the packet of crisps and whatever, and then you think, "I should finish it. I don't want to wake up to a half-open bag," right? So then you eat far too much, but you go, "Tomorrow morning I'll get it back," but then you might not, right? So it's this inner war of the parent that can be quite shaming, and the child that sort of goes, "You deserve, it's all right. You've had a hard week." And what's missing, of course, is the adult in the middle,
Mhm.
is the one that goes, "Okay, so the little voice is saying you deserve. I can see you're tired. Is there something else we can do? Can we go for a little walk? Could we do a meditation? Could we do a little dancing? Could we have a nice apple? Or could we have a little treat and see how that goes and see how we can manage that?" So that the adult is always kind of that kind, supportive voice that's also curious. Yeah. So that's what we have to cultivate, to get out of that dichotomous thinking and that very harsh way of operating.
Right. And oftentimes we're our own worst critic.
Mm.
So how do you, through mindfulness, uh, re I don't know, redo those patterns, like override those old routines with new ones?
Mm. It takes time. That's the first thing. There's no miracle sort of, you get it and then, you know, uh, it's all done. If this pattern has been going for a long time, it can take years to actually undo, but you'll start to see some improvements as you make some changes. And what I found in that, I trained in mindful eating, and then found that it was mainly geared to very, very, very obese people, and it didn't apply to the majority of the clients that I was seeing, who perhaps were slim, but they still had the whole thing going all the time. I would say that if you ask most women, it'll be 80 or 90% that have it going. And it's if you think about it from a perspective of, that was the other thing that bothered me, is that the amount of energy that goes into that, when it's the first thing you think about in the morning, how little can I eat? And that's the program running versus doing things that are really worthwhile. That's sad. So we did the mindful eating, and then I started running pilots of it to just see, what were they saying when we ran this program? And as we were probably doing them, it became clearer and clearer that this idea of dear body kept coming up. So people kept saying, "Oh, the dear body," and we put just intuitively the hands on the heart. Go, dear body, dear body, and then we started to integrate this method of connecting with the body as an integral part of it, because I think that when we are lost in the thinking like this, the missing piece that kind of sponsors the adult, if you like, is the connection and deep appreciation for the dear body, this living organism that we live in. So one woman at one point said, I noticed I can't go shopping and put rubbish in my basket if I've said, dear body, what do we need? I can't, because I'm connected to it. So, we protect what we fall in love with, and we can only abuse what we're disconnected from. So you can't abuse it when you have an intimate relationship with it, and you sort of, are walking along with it, if you like.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so if somebody is addicted to something, uh, how do they how do they break that addiction? Normally, what has to happen, my understanding is that there's some sort of intervention or some sort of um, major event, like maybe a rehab or something like that.
Mm.
But through mindfulness, perhaps somebody could make that shift in an easier, more gentle way. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I suppose with addiction, it's always about early intervention, right? Ideally. But often people come to a point where I've worked with quite a few, particularly women who wanted to drink less or stop drinking, because they found that the shame component of it was so painful that it was costing them so much. So in that case, I think, yeah, for many, it becomes it's a question of, now the costs outweigh the little kick I get from it, or it's too embarrassing, or now I have more, children, or whatever it is. Um, and to be honest, the way I have worked with it is to do more and more of the dear body, so that coming into that awareness of, okay, so right now I have urge this urge for it because it's now 5 o'clock on a Friday. What can I do? And I notice that, or I know it's going to happen. What can I do differently? So, that's the basic behavioral stuff. So don't go to the pub with your mates. Say no to that party for a while. Have your non-alcoholic drinks there. So plan for it in terms of how you're going to manage it, right? And put yourself in different positions so that the associations that you have are broken. That's a really important part. And then really being okay with noticing that urge, and see if you can, knowing that it'll pass. So you might, let's say it's chocolate addiction, right? You're lying in front of the TV at night, and that's when you have the chocolate. So you notice that sort of chocolate chocolate, and you go, okay, so what can I do differently? I can be with the sensation of the body and go, dear body, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And then you can go to the cupboard and take, say, one piece of chocolate and go, now we're going to eat this, but we're going to eat it mindfully, because after all, what we want is the experience. We actually don't want the whole bar of chocolate. We want that experience. And sometimes we want it to fill the black hole of loneliness. Sometimes we want to just, it's a habit. Sometimes we just want a little reward. Sometimes we want the comfort. So when we eat it mindfully, first of all, we get that rich experience, but also then to be curious about, what is this a substitute for? What is it that I'm actually yearning? Because often food, it's such a primary thing that actually, it uncovers a whole journey of what that is. And for me, for instance, part of my binging at the time was a way to disassociate. Like if I was just eating, I was nowhere. La, 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 right? Then you pay for it afterwards. So that's the other thing that you naturally train in mindfulness, is that ability to go, what are the long-term next, hour and 2 days and month consequence of what I'm doing now? Right. So that's what when you naturally start to arise, but you also train it consciously. Go, okay, so I want to have the 10th piece of chocolate now. How am I going to feel in an hour if I do that? How am I going to feel in a day if I do that? Or tomorrow morning if I do that? And that starts to be part of your decision making, so that you step out of just living in the fast lane of just, giving me what I want, and going into longer term consequences of my actions. So it's a combination of things depending on the client.
Yeah.
Yeah. And lots of tenderness for our dear body.
Gotcha. And when, uh,
Sorry.
hmm, what if someone is let's say an atheist or agnostic? Is mindfulness something that is going to be appealing to them, or is it more for somebody who is of a
Of a
person of
faith.
faith, or someone who believes in a higher power?
I don't think you have to believe in any higher power. Buddhism is probably more of a science than it is a religion, I think. I'm not a Buddhist because there's no requirement to become a Buddhist. And I like that. That alone, to me, as a hyper rational, really appeals. Instead of take what you like from it and throw the rest away. Um, I think that when we cultivate mindfulness, um, we start to have awe experiences that come from within that aren't necessarily framed in any religious context. So I think it's just naturally becomes part of our experience, without it being imposed. Yeah, that's certainly my experience. I mean, I come from a
Hmm.
Christian perspective. Yeah,
So
no, go.
go ahead.
No, I did. I come from a Christian perspective, but I always had problems with it. I didn't think it was logical. I didn't think it was truthful, and certainly oppressive to women. And had some stories. I went, that's just nonsense. Um, and so this endless curiosity and finding and that is within Buddhism was so appealing. This thing of no requirement to submit to ideas that didn't really sit right. Um, a surrender of our own will at times in terms of thinking we know and coming into not knowing, but that's healthy because we don't know. Nobody knows a thing, right? Really, we're just guessing.
Hmm. Now, you had mentioned earlier that your sister had epilepsy and that you had a hard time um, coming to terms with that, and the injustice of it. Where are you at now, years later, in terms of your coming to terms with it, and kind of seeing perhaps a bigger picture?
Mm. I think to me it's very clear that we we mix up um, what happens to us with our ability to influence. Often we blame ourselves and each other if we become ill. We think, well, you haven't been exercising enough, and you haven't been eating enough, and we blur those lines around. Life has no heart. Things just happen. The poor Ukrainians, people who are born, a baby that's born in Africa and sucking on a breast with no milk in it. My sister who gets epilepsy at 12. Um, you can say, yes, the context was there for that to arise, but did that individual choose that? Did that individual create that? No, I think that's what we kind of have blurred. So things happen. I have worked with beautiful parents whose children has died, right? Have died. That there's no rhyme and reason or justice or fairness in any of that. Life just happens. But of course, what we have some control over, probably less than we think, I think, is how we sit in relation to it. Yeah. That's how I see it. So for instance, with my sister with her epilepsy, the whole ride that the family took when this beautiful, bright young girl started to fit and come back with blood all over, or had a fit in a phone box at the time, and then had been robbed on top of it, and not able to study. So the grief in that as a family is, of course, a life ride that we all are exposed to. It's part of life that we have these experiences, not just delight ones, but difficult ones, that bring us to compassion, that bring us to, well, now I can't talk to her like I talk to you because she's in a different place. She's affected by it. So then how can I come into adjusting my expectations so I can connect with her in a different way? And so she becomes a teacher for us all in that way.
Right. And if if I could ask where you stand in terms of reincarnation, because perhaps that's a way to make sense of things that seem totally unjust in this lifetime, is to zoom out and look across many lifetimes and see that the victim in a past life perhaps was the perpetrator.
Yeah, personally, I don't see it like that. I think we have such a need for to think there's justice. But I think there's an element where punishment is contained in the act. If you in this life, so if you do horrible things, if you're unkind, if you hurt other people, you're going to live in disconnect. You're going to live in some kind of suffering. Even if you're smiling and having fun, there's still going to be a pain in your heart, if you like. So I think that if we want some kind of justice, we can usually say that those that do unkind things, they live in some kind of disconnect in general. I think that with reincarnation, who knows? Who knows? But I think it's our need to want to have justice, have fairness, be true, that we then create these models, because it's unbearable to just go, wow, so that person freaking got away with it. Yeah, but that is what happens. Many get away with it. Many get away with it, right? And it is what it is. You know, I think fairness is only kind of relevant as a principles when it comes to handing out lollies, if you like. It's something that we can say, I want to try to be fair to my children. I want to try to be fair, but to think of fairness in terms of the world, I don't think so. I don't think so. It's much more chaotic than that.
Hmm. Do you think that our universe is friendly or unfriendly or indifferent?
I think it is whatever we make it out to be, and that's a result of our forming. You know, I'm so interested in this thing that, you know, what has brought you here today, you know, what has brought me here today is everything we've ever experienced, right? So we are a result of that, and we can't make choices where we haven't had a seed planted within us so that we can access that. Like, I can't make a choice of something I have never been exposed to, if that makes sense. So when I walk in the morning and I think of a lovely email that I have had from somebody who was part of a course and say, oh, I really, you know, that was really useful to me and I really enjoyed it. I walk not from a perspective of, oh, I'm so amazing, but rather, wow, aren't I lucky to live in a system, a body system, a system, to have this experience that I can be of use in that way, then I can have that delight moment of being of service. That is a privilege, right? So then whether the world is good or bad, it becomes really a question of how how am I interacting with it? Am I exposing myself to nature in particular? That is just amazing, but also cruel, right? But am I seeing the awe? Am I open to the awe? Am I open to seeing myself in a way that brings goodness? We know, for instance, that the brain, um, when it is in health, gives us the experience of kindness and compassion. So therefore, the more we are in health, we're going to see the world as good and we're going to seek the good. The more we are caught in damage and disfiguration mentally, the more we're going to see it's cruel. What do you think?
So do you think that, do you think that um, let me recollect my thoughts here. Yeah. So how I feel about it is that the universe is friendly, and that it's also a creation of our own making, that we co-create our
Mm,
reality along with the
mm,
creator, with uh, with the
mm-hmm.
divine, and that everything does have purpose. And if we don't see it, if all we see is injustice or tyranny or hatred, we haven't zoomed out far enough. And that's my belief.
So, what do you mean by everything has purpose?
Um,
For whom?
there's a bigger picture at
Okay.
play. It's like when you're on the ground, you can't see above the
Mm-hmm.
treetops and above the rainforest
Yeah.
canopy. Your higher self can, and so if you tap into that, you can see that, oh, okay, so the Ukraine, um, there is a lot of pain and anguish and hurt and so forth, and there's also uh, a higher purpose there, that perhaps in those 15 biolabs that were destroyed by the Russians, one of those biolabs working on gain of function research would have had a breach or even an intentional releasing of one of those uh, super pathogens that would have wiped out the planet. And so um, that injustice, or that um, horrible event of the war actually prevented the much larger catastrophe of a much worse pandemic. Who's to say? But my belief is that there always is a higher purpose and a bigger picture at play.
So a purpose that is committed to the common good, the overall good. Is that one way of saying it?
No,
Because the
um,
Ukrainians and
I distinguish common good from the higher good. Like, so your higher good, or uh, the highest good, is what I believe is what we're um, what we get in ultimately our soul's highest good. But the common good is a least common denominator, and isn't in each individual's best interest necessarily.
hmm,
So I always ask for, when I pray, for the highest good and not the common good. And I also actually ask for the most benevolent
hmm.
outcome. So, is it, for you, is mindfulness prayer, or prayer mindfulness? Or are they two very distinct, different things?
I think they are. I think there is a difference. depending on how you pray. Because I think one of the characteristics certainly of the prayer that I learned as a child was kind of wanting something. Um, Whereas in the mindfulness, there is an appreciation and a staying with, a training the mind to pay attention, coming into cultivating the heart, and appreciating the body. So there is a no acquiring kind of element to mindfulness versus some elements in prayer. Um, yeah. Just coming back to the purpose conversation, because
Do you see prayer as what's let's say that again?
if we were
Sorry.
to come back to the purpose conversation, because I think it's a really interesting one, because
Hmm.
the way you're saying it, the way I understand it, is that sometimes then for the highest good, the benevolent good, some people's lives will be sacrificed in effect, right?
Well, again, if we zoom out far enough, and,
Mm,
bear in mind that I'm a former agnostic, almost
mm-hmm.
atheist, who had a couple of awakening experiences uh, that were life changing. Let's just
Yes.
say, let's just put it that way. But my understanding is if you look across lifetimes, that like let's say somebody has been through uh, this game of life hundreds of times
Mm-hmm.
already, and so life and death aren't nearly as dire or final as you might think if that's
Mm-hmm.
the case. And so death, if it's just a doorway, is not like somebody's life is sacrificed and then
Mm-hmm.
that's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the end. I had a past life
Mm-hmm.
regression where I saw in my immediately past
Mm-hmm.
life, I was dared to jump off of a
Right.
bridge by some other teenagers. I was a teenager at the
Yeah.
time. This was like in the
Yeah.
60s. Yeah, I think it was in the 60s. And I have fear of water
Mm.
now, fear of
Mm.
drowning, but it's lessened now that I had that
Experience.
regression
Yes.
hypnosis, and it wasn't traumatizing seeing that scene play out. It was like watching a
Mm.
movie, and if I had to choose again, like my life was snuffed short, right? Uh, I was almost bamboozled into making that to taking that dare, and yet would I change a thing about it?
Mm.
Absolutely not. I'm living my best life, and I I wouldn't want to be 70 years old now or 60 or whatever the age would be, and having that life. This is the life I'm meant to
Mm-hmm.
live. And so if you again zoom out far enough, it doesn't seem so dire and final. Like some people are trying to live to 150 years old. I have a client who's trying to live to 180, and good for him. I mean, I'm encouraging of that if that's a dream or a
Mm.
mission for that person. But that's not my
Mm.
aim. I just know when my mission here in this lifetime is done. I move
Mm.
on. Home isn't here. Home is on the other side
Mm.
of the veil.
Mm.
Ram Dass would say, "We're all walking each other
Yeah,
home
which is such a beautiful. Yeah,
to the
that's
other
right.
side." It's the end of that's the rest of the
Yes.
sentence that Ram Dass doesn't say, but our home on the other side
Yeah.
of the veil.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts
ah,
on all
I,
this. I know this is
you know,
different from your belief system, but I'm
well, it is and it isn't. I mean, I've also had, I did a wonderful treat with Jack Cornfield where we did, some very powerful past life stuff. And actually, I had the oddest experience because Dan Siegel was there too. And we had a very similar experience. And when we shared it, he went, "Me too. I was in. Me too. Me too." It was really peculiar, right? And I don't know where to put it. I don't know. I don't know because I also know how incredibly suggestive and entangled our minds are. So I really don't. I don't know. But I've had some very strong spiritual experiences of zooming into the. I think it would be afterlife. I don't know, but it feels like a shared consciousness and the self disappearing, which is very hard, I think, for this self to accept.
Mm.
So I probably and whether it is then very strong lives that pop up in these experiences or whether they are ours, I hesitate to believe that we stay individual in any form. Um, but who knows? Who knows? As my grandfather, when he was dying, he was in his 70s and he was dying from lung cancer, high on morphine, and a very strong believer. He held my dad's hand and he said, "The good thing about this is I'll soon be able to tell you what it's like to die." Right? And so, we don't know. We'll never know. Well, perhaps one day we will. But I also think, in your lovely idea, this
Yeah,
this
well,
notion of, the big picture, that we tend to be very anthropocentric, right? We see it as we humans are the center of everything. And I don't know if you have a pet, but when we have a pet, we realize they are so much more sophisticated than we ever gave them credit for, right? My cat, my Burmese cat, she absolutely has empathy. When I'm working with somebody, if they're really, really upset, she will start to scratch on the door, right? She just knows. So I think, good for who, good, best for who, big picture for who. I don't know. I think, and perhaps it's part of the miracle of life that we will never know. We just, so perhaps it's the Joseph Campbell thing: follow your bliss, follow your little inkling of yes, yes, and that's as good as it gets. I was talking to a friend of mine who's one of the world's leading experts in working in chiropractic applications for children, and we're talking about how we've led our lives. Did we have? None of us had a goal of anything. What we were open to curiosity, and we grabbed some opportunities that we were blessed to have. But it was always that our heart was kind of on fire around something, and we followed it. We went, yes, and then we just keep following it, and it takes us then into these crinkly ways. And yeah, and is there a big plan? Perhaps. Is there a fate line? Perhaps. Is it? Yeah, I don't know. We're just little servants of it in a way, having the experience. Um,
I used to think that, it was uh, just kind of fate, and um, I was not a victim of it, but I just, maybe a servant to it. But now I'm much more clear on my role as a
mm,
co-creator of my reality, of this
mm,
universe that I'm the observer in. So quantum physics, the observer effect. So by observing, you take a wave of potentiality, infinite possibilities, and you collapse it down to one thing. And that might be something that you don't actually really want, but it's the thing you're focused on, right? Oh, I really don't want to get cancer. I'm really worried about getting cancer. I don't want to get cancer. Please, no cancer. Please, no cancer. And then you end up with cancer because that's all you're thinking about. And I guess it's kind of like you you can uh, you can believe that everything is a miracle or that
that's right.
nothing is a miracle. And if you believe, if you collapse all possibilities into nothing's a miracle, it's going to be a rough
Yes.
life. Whereas if everything's a miracle, synchronicities abound, serendipities, chance occurrences, coincidences, like
Mm,
magic
mm,
all the time.
yeah.
Do you
Oh,
experience that?
absolutely, absolutely. And I think it is that thing of there is the whole thing of a fate line has really come into me the last year or two, because before that I really thought very much that I um probably that I had much more power than I did have. I think I thought to choose my thought, to choose my, and I think that we are so much more in the grips of our subconscious than we think. Doesn't mean there's not that opportunity to choose if we haven't been too damaged by trauma, if we've had the circumstances that had given us that the brain capacity, the emotional capacity. Because I think that in working with some people who've had very, very significant trauma, to the window of choice is much narrower than those who have been blessed with a loving, stable childhood with lots of possibilities. So perhaps they run somehow. I absolutely agree that we are co-creating, but I also do wonder. I read some of the personal stories of some of the women in Ukraine who worked for a certain magazine, sitting there, everything normal. Then next minute they are fleeing with their babies, and just trying to survive. You know, where does that sit in it all? Some of our the ability to see the miracle and to appreciate the spring flowers in Ukraine are still there, but harder to access than it is for us who sit in a safe place in abundance.
Mhm. So, are you familiar with the concept of soul contracts?
With what? Sorry, what contracts?
Soul
Tell me
contracts
about it. I have heard, but I
that
don't know much
we
about it.
make agreements. And, yeah. So I actually interviewed someone who knows quite a lot about it. I learned about soul contracts last year. Read this person's
Mm-hmm.
article. Vasundhara Gupta
Yeah.
is her name, and so she was a past guest. I interviewed her. Uh, I don't know, 3 4 months after I read this
Mm-hmm.
article, and it just felt true
Right.
to me that we actually do make agreements, commitments, vows, promises to meet our soulmate, to um, start a business with a particular business partner, to have the children that we have, to have the parents that we have, to end up in bad situations and to dig our way out of them, or
Mm-hmm.
not. To maybe for that to be the end of that lifetime. That we go into it knowing full well what we have scripted for ourselves. So that kind of ties in with your concept that you shared of the fate line. So if everything is already written, as is talked about in the Quran and in the Alchemist book, the concept is maktub, which is Arabic for "it is
Mm-hmm.
written." Then you stubbing your toe next Tuesday is already written. You uh, sideswiping somebody else's vehicle 2 months from now is already written. You saying something you really shouldn't have to your kids, already written, et
Mm-hmm.
cetera, et cetera. But yet, whereas free will, it's in the moments in between when you choose a different response, where you don't react, you
Mm.
restrict, and you reveal light. Or and the moments where you are extra proactive outside of your comfort zone. And then you get a timeline upgrade. You get to jump timelines and become even more benevolent. It's like your benevolence brings more synchronicities, which brings more benevolence, which brings more synchronicities, and it's a virtuous cycle as long as you decide not to get sucked in to your
Mm.
reactivity and to any kind of darkness that might be
Mm.
surrounding. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, lots of thoughts. But one thing I think is important that to consider. That is that ways of seeing and believing life emerge as a group emerging. It emerge from a certain place, and they all have certain consequences. Now we can put it into a political framework. So I could say, so the way you're seeing the world, the danger that I see as an old Dane brought up in the Cold War time, is that it potentially can be seen as a very, very liberal way of understanding humans, and therefore, well, if that's how it is, then why should we build hospitals? Because you kind of created, that's just your soul agreement, and well, it is what it is. So there's a little alarm bell for me in that, in terms of what it.
Oh, I would never want somebody to ignore somebody else's pain or suffering.
I
What is destined to be is destined to be, except if you're a kind, compassionate, loving person, you don't want people to suffer, and this is an opportunity for you to step up, to go outside your comfort zone and to assist. And so, if it's volunteering at
mm,
a hospital, or it's donating, or it's taking the time to have a conversation with a neighbor that you wouldn't normally talk to because you know that they're hurting, and it's the
mm.
right thing to do. This is all uh, important and part of the benevolence that gets you a timeline advance.
Yeah. Yeah, I
In my
love
book.
that. Yeah. No, I hear you, and I hear the pure heart in it. I just I um there was a headline here not so long ago. It said, it is time now for the pessimists to step up, because the optimists have ignored climate change. They have ignored the dangers around Ukraine. They have ignored too many things. Come on, pessimists, it's time for you. uh, and I suppose, if I were to see it with a sort of a pessimistic thing, then I think there's a potential danger if we say this, if we have and that's the same with a very fatalistic, viewpoint, that they come out of a certain time, and it's important to zoom out and go, what kind of ideology and what are the results potentially of this way of seeing things in the wrong hands, right? So if the heart is pure and we're completely committed, yes, but how could it be misconstrued? So that's one thing. In Buddhism, I suppose I like that idea. You sort of climb the ladder. Every time you see a little bit of light, there's a potential to a little bit more light, etc. I think that's a really lovely, way of seeing things. I love the idea of dependent arising that you probably are aware of from Buddhism. Do you know that idea, that observation? Okay,
No, please
so
explain.
so that is saying that every experience we have is a dependent arising. In every moment is a dependent arising. So the best way to kind of explain it is to say, if we're looking at a fire, then at a certain time a spark comes up, and what determines, what influences that spark comes up in that particular moment? That's then the temperature in the air, the breeze, the dryness of the timber, how long it's been burning for, the intensity of the fire. It's all of those things, isn't it? Yeah. And so we then go, okay, so that's the same thing for us. So that means you and I sitting here right now, having these sparks between us of conversation, they are all dependent arising based on everything that we have ever been exposed to. And if we go to past lives, even back to that, right? So it is all arising, also a result of you at the end of the day, and you, whatever has happened to you before today, what you've had to eat, whether you've moved or not, all of those things all bring up this certain quality in this moment, never to be repeated. So that's part of the magic, if you like, isn't it? That the beat that comes, oh, there it is. So what's this moment, if you like, uncovering and presenting at the same time? And that part of our role is to be the observers of that, non-attached, right? To go, well, there's a delight moment. Let me just swim in it for a moment. There's a difficult one. Let me bring my heart to it. There's whatever is arising for us to greet it as a human experience. Yeah, I think it's a beautiful concept, and observation of a truth. I think it's how it is. Yeah. And I suppose the thing.
Now, you mentioned a couple of times that you mentioned a couple of times the word truth, at
Yes.
least a few times, and I would love to hear what your thoughts are on the difference between small t truth, like your own
Mm,
personal truth, and capital
mm,
T truth, universal truth, like that is not just universal, but true in the multiverse, in all universes. It's it's divine truth. So I believe that there is a difference between those two concepts, and I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
yeah. I don't. Did you ever read Socrates? Because I carried his defense speech around as a child. I just thought it was so amazing. And then, of course, when we read Shakespeare or
Oh, tell
oh,
me
it's
more
just
about
that
that.
the Socrates just had such an amazing ability, like the Buddha, like Shakespeare, to observe the human mind and to describe the human mind, to describe how we are. And so, whether it's then Shakespeare, Buddha, or Socrates, you look at these people who observed how we tend to function, irrespective of context. That we are vain, like Hans Christian Andersen. The amazing stories. You probably know the story of the Emperor's Clothes. Do you know that story? Of the very vain king who wanted amazing clothes, and the crooks who came and said, we are going to sit and weave these amazing clothes. Can you see them? Can you see them? And they said, because only the very clever people can see them. Stupid people can't see them. And of course, he said, yes, of course, because he didn't want to be exposed. And then, there comes the parade through the town where he's then wearing these clothes that, of course, aren't there. So he's walking through town in his underwear. And everybody has heard that, well, if you can't see them, you're stupid. And so a child goes, oh, but daddy, he's got nothing on. And then everybody starts to say, he's got nothing on. He's got nothing on. And so this whole thing where you'll hear the truth from a child. But Hans Christian Andersen also was able to, expose those, human truths, these truths about our character, our vanity, our greed, our delight, our love, our loyalties, and all of those. And during his confirmation, very, very poor, his mother had saved enough to buy him some boots. And he was so proud of these boots. They were much too big and very stiff leather. So he's walking in the church and he's saying, I was just aware of this was about God. And yet I was wondering, are people hearing and seeing my new boots? And then, oh no, that's right, it's about God. So this tugging, of the vanity. So another example of uncovering our minds. So I think that there's truth in that when we go, yeah, that is how I am. The Buddha was amazing at this, in going, the layers and layers of it, the five hindrances, all of those, the attachment, etc. So I think there's truth, there's that truth of uncovering our essence, if you like. And then the biggest truth is probably the unspoken truth.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. And then the biggest truth is the unspoken truth, isn't it? That's when the heart just bows in absolute, the words are not there, right? In gratitude, in amazement, in wow. That can be, a bird, it can be a flower, it can be anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Namaste. The divine in me
That's right.
acknowledges the
That's
divine in
right.
you.
And that's the unspoken field of the ultimate
Yeah,
truth.
beautiful. Now I know
Oh,
we're out of
yes.
time. Hmm. I know we're out of time, so if our listener is interested in working with you, in learning from you, how do we get them in touch with you, and
Okay,
where do we
so
send them?
it's themindfulnessclinic.com.au. And there's lots of free resources, lots of meditations. There's our newsletter, there's daily mindfulness prompts. We have coaching. I do a lot of leadership training, and we have our first retreat for a while coming up in Bali at the beautiful Zen resort. And we would love to see some more gorgeous people there. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Charlotte. This was a wonderful conversation. You're a wonderful person, and our listener, I'm sure, was inspired and positively provoked in this
Thank you
episode. So
so
thank you for
much. I
that.
really enjoyed it. Thank you for sharing these fascinating ideas. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you, listener. Get out there and make it a great week. Do something benevolent for your neighbor, and we'll catch you on the next episode.